again, everybody. Welcome back to Desert Sky Adventures. Today's adventure begins here in the old town of Dragoon, Arizona, right at the base of the Dragoon Mountains, right over there behind us. Todd is with me here today, and we are once again heading out to a historic location. This one we've never seen before, and could be potentially the oldest set of ruins we've ever filmed here on the channel. And that is at the old Dragoon Springs stagecoach stop, which predates actually the Civil War, and we'll fill you in on some of the history along the way.
Now, if you're not familiar with the Dragoon Springs station, don't feel too bad. I wasn't familiar with it myself up until a couple days ago. Dragoon Springs is a historic site in what is now Cochise County, Arizona, an elevation of 4,925 feet. The name comes from a nearby natural spring, Dragoon Spring, to the south in the Dragoon Mountains. The name originates from the 3rd U.S. Cavalry Dragoons who battled the Chiricahua, including Cochise, during the Apache Wars. The Dragoons established posts around 1856, after the Gadsden Purchase made the area a U.S. territory. Dragoon Spring was a watering place on the Southern Emigrant Trail, in territory which eventually joined the United States in the Gadsden Purchase, becoming part of the New Mexico Territory. Following the purchase, Dragoon Spring was used as a watering place by San Antonio to San Diego Mail Line, starting in July of 1857. The station was used by the Butterfield Overland Mail Company from September 1858 to March 1861, and by other stage lines from 1865 to about 1880. But in order for you to drive there, you're going to need a vehicle that is well suited to handle the rough and rugged terrain.
Well, Todd, I think we've gone as far as we can go in the Jeep. Looks like we're going to have to walk it from here.
Yeah, thanks.
This drawing of the station was made by H.C. Grosvenor in 1860. Notice the 2 graves in the lower left-hand corner. We'll talk more about them later. He writes, this station, or corral, is 85 miles east of Tucson. It is a rectangular enclosure protected by a stone wall 8 feet high. 1/3 of the space is occupied by storehouses and the sleeping apartment of the station master. These structures are covered by thatched roofs. The mules are kept in the other part, ready for change on the arrival of the mail. A heavy wooden gate defends the entrance. The graves of Butterfield's Overland Mail Company employees are a result of a massacre that started just a few minutes after midnight on September 9, 1858. Some of the station crew had just gone on to the San Pedro River to build a station. Left behind were James Burr, William Cunningham, James Lang, and Silas St. John, along with 3 Mexican laborers. In the night, the Mexican laborers ambushed and murdered all of the men except for St. John, whose arm was badly wounded. He would remain at the fort for the next several days as one by one his men slowly succumbed to their injuries. St. John was contemplating suicide, but then finally, on the 7th day, help arrived and his arm was amputated right there at the station. The only survivor of this brutal attack would live on to tell his story. current marker at the station incorrectly states that one of the reasons for the abandonment of the station was because of the Pony Express. But the Pony Express never existed in Arizona and was not in competition with any stage line.
About a mile out, the Benson stagecoach robbery.
Mm-hmm.
The Benson stagecoach robbery. Interesting.
From San Pedro to Dragoon Springs, where we're at, 21 miles.
During the American Civil War, this station was the site of the First Battle of Dragoon Springs and near the site of the Second Battle of Dragoon Springs, fought between Apache warriors and Confederate soldiers. Ironically, it was also the location where General O.O. Howard and Chiricahua Apache Chief Cochise ended 11 bloody years of warfare with a treaty on October 12, 1872. This granted the Apache most of what has become Cochise County as a reservation.
Sleeping in here were killed in these rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had the Flagstaff, which about where these folders are, and that was, it said for was it corral stock. So I don't know if they would have kept the animals in here for protection.
Man, almost 200 years of history right here. Almost. And this is what's left today.
The wood would have just decomposed and been gone, but
no mortar, just rocks.
It's just stacked. I mean, you think with these rocks here, if they were stacked up, I mean, that would put the wall close to 6 foot. When you look at some of it, like the corner over there, I mean, that's probably close to height.
Wow.
And I know, like, some of these old buildings, they had low ceilings because back in the day, you were not very tall.
Right.
That could have been a rock from this that just rolled when it fell. I mean, you have a lot of and these guys knew what they were doing.
Wonder how long it took to construct this thing and how many people were part of that construction job.
That's a lot of rock to haul in.
Yes, it is.
I mean, look at the size of some of these rocks.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a fun task. Especially if they were doing it out here in the summer.
While it might seem like the picture of tranquility today, like many Old West locations, this place has certainly seen its fair share of violence.
Hey folks, I hope you're enjoying today's video. Let me just break in here for a minute to tell you about my friends at PearBoxMonthly.com. I'm wearing my newest Pearbox Monthly t-shirt. It's even Arizona themed. Pearbox Monthly brings you high quality, soft fit t-shirts, all with some sort of supernatural or paranormal theme. Bigfoot, space aliens, ghosts, and superstitions. They've got it all at PearboxMonthly.com. Right now, DSA viewers get 20% off their order with the promo code DSA20 at checkout. So be sure to check them out, PearboxMonthly.com. And now, back to the video.
There are 6 graves that have been identified at Dragoon Springs Station. There are 4 rock piles covering graves north of the entrance to the station, and 2 to the west. Records indicate that 7 individuals were killed at or near the station, and they were buried here. But who, if anyone, remains here today is unclear. The current marker states that we're looking at the graves of 4 Confederate soldiers, the only 4 to have died in Arizona in battle. But according to researcher Gerald Annert, there's good reason to believe that there are currently no Confederates here at all. According to researcher Gerald Annert, there are 3 Butterfield employees buried at Arizona's Dragoon Springs Station as a result of the September 9, 1860 massacre. The problem is that it is not known under which of the visible rock cairns covering the graves that hold the remains of the employees. Unfortunately, the primary references do not support the interpretive marker that incorrectly states that all 4 are Confederate soldiers. The marker states that Confederate John Donaldson may be buried there, but he was killed 90 miles from the station near 9 Mile Waterhole northwest of Tucson. There is no evidence that he was ever a Confederate soldier. The lone survivor of the attack, Silas St. John, gave his own account of the layout of the graves, showing James Lang in one and James Byrne William Cunningham together in another, with his amputated arms somewhere in between them. St. John would go on to live a full life and died in San Diego in September of 1919. So if the 3 slain Butterfield employees are buried in 2 graves closest to the station, then who could be buried in the other 2 graves? At the spring, about a mile south of the station, was a battle between Confederate forces and the Apache on May 5, 1862. And it's easy to see why some of the details of this attack would get lost, as the Confederacy and the Union had different accounts of what actually happened that day. One thing they agree on is that 4 people were killed near Dragoon Springs. Some accounts say 3 Texans were killed. Another report stated there were inscriptions on the grave S. Ford, May 5, 1862, on one, and Ricardo on the other. A chronological record of the Confederate Army engagements in early May 1862, which were between Tucson and Dragoon Springs, adds a bit of clarity. May 5, 1862, 3 soldiers killed, including Sergeant Samuel B. Ford, 2 soldiers wounded, and 1 Mexican boy killed, Ricardo. Therefore, it could be safe to assume that the remaining 2 graves belonged to Samuel Ford, the only Confederate actually at the site, and Ricardo, the Mexican boy, both killed May 5, 1862, in a battle with the Apache. Inconsistent reports are one thing, but there's inconsistencies in the photos as well. Take a look at this photo of the graves from 1929. Appears to be a completely different rock pile from what we see today. Could these graves have been robbed at some point, or perhaps the rocks were restacked or possibly even moved off of their original locations? It's unclear. What do you think?
And we determined he was killed in 1862. So that puts it 17 years before a tombstone even existed.
It's amazing. It's a pretty peaceful place today, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. This one actually has a
Marker?
S. Ford, May 5th, 1862.
Now, I didn't know this at the time of filming, but I just stumbled across a grave marker that sounds very much like the one described in early reports.
I think is what it says.
Another photo from 1929 shows a very similar grave marker on top of a pile of rocks, but what it doesn't show you is what grave it's on top of.
That's what it looks like.
Is
Fifth
this
or
the
sixth,
same
something like
marker
that.
from the 1929 photo, or perhaps even the one that was described from the 1860s? We may never know for sure.
1862, it's a year after the Civil War started.
Another photo from the site shows a large boulder with what appears to be the name Ricardo written across it. There was no sign of this boulder when we were actually at the site, and again, you cannot tell which grave the boulder is on. But according to Annert's research, there is a chance, albeit a slight one, that Ricardo was actually a female. A search of the 1860 federal census for Arizona was made for the name Ricardo. None was found for Tucson or any of the nearby communities, but in 1860, the Tucson census identified a man named Juan Valenzuela as a stock herder. In his family is listed Ricarda, age 23, female. Is it possible that Ricardo was actually a female, and she was buried at the Dragoon Springs station? What do you think?
So Todd, we've once again found ourselves in what I would consider an Old West graveyard. Not a whole lot of graves here, but I think this is the oldest.
This would be the oldest we've come across to date.
Man, that's crazy. 180 years, roughly.
Unfortunately, damage was done to the supposed Confederate rock cairn sometime in 1967. One of the Confederate graves, the one believed to be of that of S. Ford, was desecrated, and the body was removed. The body and the perpetrators were never found. The 1967 desecration report states that Sergeant Ford's remains were stolen, so it could be possible that no Confederates are buried at the station currently. But the desecration report states that the body in the second grave north of the station was the one that was stolen. If so, then it was Burr and Cunningham's graves that were stolen and not that of Samuel Ford.
Now that we've seen what's left of the old stagecoach stop, we're going to head up the road a little bit. Back that way. See if we can find the spring.
It was somewhere right around this area where the Confederate battle with the Apache took place.
Oh yeah. This might be it.
Pretty cool.
Todd, what'd you think?
Oh, this was interesting. You know, being able to see not only the site of the stage stop, but seeing the 4 Confederate graves. It's
Absolutely.
definitely a lot of history and a lot of unsettledness came out here.
Yeah.
But
For
that's
sure.
why we do it.
That's why we do it, folks. Thank you very much for watching today. We do appreciate y'all. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. Those things really help us out and they don't cost you a thing. But that's going to be about it for today, folks. So from the base of the Dragoon Mountains at the old Dragoon Springs stage stop, still here almost 180 years later. Until next time, until the next video, we'll see you down the road.